HowExpert. HowExpert. Top 10 interesting Black history facts and lessons. Number 1. Drag and drag shows originated in the Black community. Have you ever watched RuPaul's Drag Race? Do you love a good drag show? The first drag queen reported in American history was a Black man named William Dorsey Swan. Swan threw drag balls in the Washington, D.C. area in the late 19th century. Eventually, his events became the target of the local police. Swan was arrested for his parties, but he fought back by attempting to sue for his rights to do drag and host drag balls. This makes him the first person in United States history to take legal action on behalf of the LGBT issue. Number 2. Bayard Rustin is a hidden queer civil rights activist. You know about Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington, but did you know that a gay man helped him organize it all? Bayard Rustin was a longtime activist for the expanding civil rights, but he has largely been scrubbed from our popular understanding of the movement. Rustin has always been somewhat hidden from the movement because he was an out gay man. He was an organizer of the March on Washington movements and the Freedom Rides, and even helped educate Dr. King on the principles of nonviolence. Number 3. W.E.B. Du Bois was not the first African American to get a PhD. Perhaps you have never heard who the first African American to earn a PhD is, but I guarantee you have heard of W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois was an important intellectual voice of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Some of his most famous writings include The Souls of Black Folk, written in 1903, and Black Reconstruction, written in 1935. And he was a founding member of the Niagara Movement, which would go on to become the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or also known as the NAACP. A popular misconception is that Du Bois was the first Black person in the country to receive his PhD. That honor goes to Edward A. Boucher, who completed a PhD in physics from Yale University in 1888, about 7 years before Du Bois would get his at Harvard. Number 4. Shirley Chisolm was the first Black woman elected to Congress. In 1968, Shirley Chisolm of Brooklyn, New York became the first Black woman to be elected to Congress. She represented New York's 12th Congressional District, a district in the Bed-Stuy area, for 7 terms in 1969 to 1983. She would go on to become the first Black candidate for a major party nomination for President of the United States and the first woman to run for the Democratic Party's nomination. Number 5. A famous Black Panther was also a disability rights activist. Brad Lomax was a Black Panther who helped found the party's Washington chapter in 1969. He also suffered from multiple sclerosis. When he moved to Oakland, California in 1973, he was greeted by a burgeoning disabilities rights movement. As Lomax used a wheelchair as a result of his condition, he struggled to navigate the Oakland transit system. He needed his brother, Glenn, to help him out of his wheelchair and onto the bus. Glenn would then have to return to the street to retrieve Lomax's wheelchair. Disability activists in San Francisco demanded that the government enforce Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Lomax was inspired when the disability rights movement occupation of the San Francisco Federal Building. Lomax and local Black Panther Party members brought food to the protesters. The sit-in was successful, and after 25 days of occupying the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, the regulations were signed. Number 6. Ketanji Brown Jackson makes the 3rd Black Supreme Court justice in history. Out of the 115 justices that have served on the bench since the Supreme Court was established in 1789, only 3 of them Black. Thurgood Marshall became the first justice of color when former President Lyndon B. Johnson appointed him in 1967. There would not be another Black justice for nearly 3 decades. In 1991, George H.W. Bush was the appointed Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. Ketanji Brown Jackson is now the court's 3rd Black justice and the first Black woman. Number 7. Buffalo Soldiers were real and Black. Buffalo Soldiers are much more than the title of a Bob Marley song. The original Buffalo Soldiers were the all-black regiments which made up of the 9th, 10th, 24th, and 25th Infantries. Buffalo Soldiers were named as such because of the buffalo coats. These regiments were mostly led by white U.S. Army officers. These soldiers were amongst the first to serve as National Park Rangers. They were vital to westward expansion and participated in important military battles. They were active in the Battle of San Juan Hill during the Spanish-American War of 1898. Number 8. Black people have been in the States over 400 years. On August 20th, 1619, several kidnapped Angolians arrived at Point Comfort in Hampton, Virginia. They were traded in exchange for supplies. Just 6 years later, William Tucker, the first known black person to be born in the 13 colonies. Number 9. Black people's inventions help keep you safe every day. Did you happen to go for a drive today? Well, if you stopped at a traffic light, you can thank Garrett Morgan. Morgan created the 3-signal traffic light in 1923. He eventually sold the patent for his invention to General Electric. And if you have a home security system, you can thank nurse-turned-inventor Marie Van Britten Brown. Marie created the first closed-circuit home security system at only 40 years old in response to rising crime in her neighborhood. Her invention had cameras, TV monitors, microphones, and eventually a feature that can call the police at a push of a button. Her patent security system would go on to be used by other home and business owners. Number 10. Juneteenth is not the day slavery ended. On January 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, thus declaring the immediate freedom of enslaved people in the Confederate States. Word of the proclamation was sent through Union soldiers as they conquered the South. Due to the remote nature of Texas and the lack of Union presence, enslaved people in Texas did not know they were free even when the war was ending. On June 19, 1865, Union Army General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas and issued General Order No. 3. This order notified some of the last enslaved people in the Confederate States that they were free. People were still enslaved in 2 Union states, Delaware and Kentucky. They would not be freed until the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery nationwide on December 6, 1865. HowExpert publishes quick how-to guides on all topics from A to Z by everyday experts. Visit HowExpert.com to learn more.